When I first met Josh Farr mid 2018 at a national student conference, straight away I knew I'd met a pretty rare individual. Compassionate, caring, committed to serving others, and with a strong belief, like we have at Picture You in Agriculture, in the importance of investing in and empowering young people. Today, I'm delighted to have Josh here with us to kick off Season 3 of Leadership is Language, Conversations with Thought Leaders. Why thought leaders for Season 3? Access to role models is a crucial part of being able to apply what you learn. At Picture You in Agriculture, our young farming champions are on a journey to become confident communicators and trusted voices for agriculture, while building lifelong partnerships within the community for the collective benefit of farmers, consumers, and the planet. Leadership is Language is part of this journey. Yet to hit 30, Josh has already pivoted his career away from engineering to found Campus Consultancy in 2017 on the insight that more effective student leaders make university better for everyone. Since then, Campus Consultancy have hosted more than 500 workshops and programs across Australia for more than 21,000 students and young people. This includes some of our young farming champions. As since 2009, Josh has also been part of the coaching team at Picture You in Agriculture and is currently the lead coach for our leadership development stream. Welcome to Conversations with Thought Leaders, Josh.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks for having me.
Very excited to have you here today. So the theme of our new series of Leadership is Language is Thought Leaders. When I was doing a bit of research on you for this interview, I noticed that one of your values at Campus Consultancy is leadership is service. So I thought perhaps we could start today with what is Campus Consultancy and why is leadership is service a value?
Sure, awesome. So for us, as you said in the start very kindly, we have the great pleasure of working with thousands and thousands of young people across different industries and unis, and everything's about increasing people's ability to be leaders in the way that they define leadership. So for us, we take a pretty broad approach in that leadership is service, essentially saying, and our philosophy is that if you're helping somebody else, if you're taking proactive action, not stepping back, if you're leaning into challenges, if you see problems as ways to add value to the world, that is leadership. And it's not necessarily about a title. So when we set it up as leadership as service, with what we do primarily with university students, I wanted to challenge this notion that you get elected or selected as a leader. And instead, it's your actions that make you a leader. And as the years have gone by, it's become, as I've dug into it and understood it more, I think what I'm really pushing back on is this concept that you get to choose your own identity. You just are something because you say you are something, versus you are something because that's what you live out. That's what your actions say. So in a world where I think we see a lot of confusion with what does it mean to be a leader, and am I an entrepreneur, or am I young enough, old enough, experienced enough, new enough? I think a lot of that can get stuck in the rhetoric in the conversation, and what we're much more focused on is, are you helping someone? And if you're helping somebody, we want to help you do that to the best of your ability. So that's kind of what it means to me. Yeah, and I think for today, like especially with this concept of like leadership is language, everything we're trying to do and orient towards is the world being a better place. And whatever we can use, whether it's the language we use, the actions we take, the beliefs we have. Gandhi said, happiness is when what you believe, what you say, and what you do are in alignment. So I think like my leadership is service is more like action oriented. And the reason it is getting people to move. The leadership is language, obviously, is what you say. We can dig into that a little bit. And then there's the beliefs. How do you see yourself? So your question of like, when did you see yourself as a leader? I'd say much more at that like belief level. So those three things sort of interplay in a really interesting way. Often and interestingly, I'll say to students all the time that you're a leader if you're participating, if you're stepping up, if you're asking a question, if you go first, like that makes you a leader, because I'm trying to use that title or that identity to sort of pull them in a direction, or to show them that they can take themselves in a direction that's empowering. So if there's someone who says, oh, I'm not a leader, well, then maybe there's power in associating to being that leader. I would say that's something that's like, it's unintegrated or it hasn't come forward yet. Versus for me, when I know what I'm doing and I'm very confident that what we do makes the world a better place, I don't identify with the title as much because it's the action. This is just what we do. This is who I am. It's like what I do is who I am, not I am a leader or entrepreneur. It's so funny, like, when you fill in the form on a plane or whatever, or a border pass now, and it's like, what's your job title? I never know what to write. I'm like, founder, I guess, like I started a thing, but like, what does that mean? So it's funny how that title I've kind of disassociated with. So I wonder where that lands with people who don't see themselves as leaders in a disempowering way, or sometimes might see themselves as, I'm a leader, therefore I must, or I should, versus this is who I am, what I believe in.
One of the things that I'm really keen to dig in with you a little bit more today is this link between leadership, and perhaps we can agree that it's not necessary, that we can stick with the idea of leadership is actions and what you do.
Sure.
And how that ties with communication. I guess, what do you see as the most important link between leadership and communication or language?
So probably a couple of things. One thing that I always just fundamentally, so this is like the philosophy stuff. This is what keeps me interested in this space, because it's complicated, right? There isn't an easy answer. It's that, and it's that, and it's this other thing. So the philosophy I like. The more practical, like, all right, strategy, what do we actually do stuff, which is why I'm always oriented towards the action at the end of the day, is I think leadership practically, if you take it up, I need to lead a group of people, I need to influence people, is picking or setting a destination and then moving people in that destination. So in the same way that you can lead a group of animals, you can lead a group of kids, you can lead a team, you can lead a book club, you can lead whatever. You've got to kind of know where you're going to orient the conversation or the work or the strategy or whatever it is. And then you've got to be able to convince people to move in that direction. A lot of the time when we teach communication skills, especially in the leadership context, eventually, like, I'll show people some different tools and techniques and ways to frame and trigger and anchor and all these different sorts of things. And eventually someone will put up their hand and they're like, this kind of sounds like manipulation. And I'm like, no. The leadership word for manipulation is influence. You're influencing people. And so, as the great philosopher Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. And so that communication part of leadership is showing people, or really having them see themselves, whether it's internal or external, that there's a vision and it's worth pursuing. And I think powerful communicators who do that, powerful leaders who do that, the more cliche ones, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is like, I have a dream. It's abstract, it's future focused, dream intentionally, right? Because it's not real. It's something that's not a current reality, that will never become a reality, but it's worth aspiring for, even though we know we'll fall short. And so I think that style of communication that says, here's something that really matters, even though we're never going to get there, we should still try to get there in terms of complete, equality for all. I think the communication in that style is quite aspirational. It's quite inspiring. And that's one archetype, and that's what it links to the vision. But then there's the practical stuff. Sometimes someone's having a bad day and you can't be like, I have a dream. It's like, I don't care about your dream. I'm sad, And it's a different way to communicate when someone's in that position. Or they're not sad, but they're frustrated and they're trying to get it and they just don't know what to do, and they might need more strategy. Or they've got the strategy, but they hit a roadblock, or someone doesn't reply to their email. And so the more agile approach to leadership, I believe, in terms of communication, is to be able to say, there are distinctly different ways to communicate. We teach 4 of them, for example, and that you need to know how to move between them and use them, and know when the right one's appropriate, and how to figure out, okay, if I'm not getting the response from someone that I want, how do I adjust my communication style in service of the bigger vision? So it's like, we're heading that way. Like, if you're the leader, if you're at the front, if you're pointing the ship, like, we're going this way, can I convince other people to kind of come with me, show them that it's valuable, make the world a better place at the same time. But one of the challenges, I think, with the communication stuff, I'm not sure if any other guests have spoken about this. Like, lots of people, I think, when they think of a good leader, is, they're confident, they're a great public speaker, they're able to influence people, they can set a vision, they can rally people together. Hitler did all those things, So it's like, you can be very effective at setting a goal, you can rally people, you can convince, give great speeches, right? You can do the whole bit, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's for good. And I think where you get into the for good bit is, I don't believe you can have a conversation about leadership without a conversation about morality and ethics. And from engineering to business to this, engineering to business, pretty easy. Like engineering is math, business is math and art a little bit. When you get into ethics and morality, it's harder. There's not a simple answer. And so the students, the young people, the professionals I see who I enjoy spending time with the most are really thoughtful about that. And they're not sort of saying, it's just this one thing, but it's all of these things. It's a particle or it's a light, depending how you look at it and what question you ask it. I think leadership's much like that.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of having our Leadership as Language webinar series is it gives us the opportunity to explore leadership through the eyes of each one of our guests and get those sort of multitude of perspectives and ideas on leadership as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you made a really nice point that being a confident communicator isn't necessarily a good thing unless it's backed up with that sort of values piece that's aligned to doing good in the community. If we look at your own journey, Josh, today you've given TED Talks, you've run over 500 workshops, you've got your own podcast, you're doing LinkedIn Lives. I think it's fair to say that you're a confident communicator. And we've already talked about some of those values behind Campus Consultancy. So I think it's very fair to say that you're communicating for good. But have you always been a confident communicator? Are you a natural public speaker?
Not at all. And it's funny. Like you'll see as I answer questions, like if you were to watch this back and not listen, you'd see my eyes are all over the place. Like I actually don't feel confident ever communicating. So it might come out that way. Sometimes I hope maybe, and I work on it intensely, but talking, it's kind of strange. When I'm in a room with someone and I'm imagining them in my mind and I can look at them, I'm so clearly in service of that person. Like that's where my mindset is. Doesn't mean I'm good at it, but like that's my intention. My intention is crystal clear. I want to understand this person first. I want to see how they see the world. I want to find out where that dissonance is. I want to see what they're trying to achieve and what's holding them back. And so every individual is like a puzzle and I'm trying to figure them out. And when it's kind of abstract or when I didn't have that, I wasn't confident at all because the engineer in me is like, what's the problem? How do I solve it? And I'm okay with the problem being multifaceted. I'm okay with it being complicated. But when it's kind of abstract, it's like I'm nervous before every talk, every podcast, feel that way. And the reason I share that is I can give you the polished answer. I can do well, this is how it happened. And this is what, but the reality is it's messy. And I always say to students, like, you don't become less afraid. You just become more brave. And so you do it because it might resonate with somebody. And someone might have listened to all of the first 2 seasons and then, get into the third season of yours and what we're doing here. And someone might be having a bad day and go, wow, here's someone who's like done a bunch of things, but they don't feel confident every day. And that might just be the message they need. Other people will go, this guy, he doesn't sound like he's got his stuff together at all. And then the next person they listen to, someone's real schmick and gives them the 3-point plan. And that's what they need. So for me, I think the communication is really varied. The strategy of it was it just took a lot of time and hard work. I don't know if we want to have a conversation about hard work. No one seems to want to talk about hard work as variables of success. But it is, those 500 workshops, some of them were 8-9 hours long. So it was a lot of repetitions and a lot of time doing it. Getting a lot of feedback was really practical, learning and trying to improve. I think the biggest thing though, whenever someone says, and often it'll be a young person who's starting off will say, how do I become a better public speaker? Mine is always study public speaking. I think modeling is one of the most powerful techniques in the universe. Like if you want anything, find someone who's already done it. If you want to write a book, learn how to surf, be a public speaker, start a business, do a podcast. Who are a bunch of people who've done it? What did they do? I heard a tip once from a guy named Brendan Bouchard where he says, whenever you interview someone who you want to be like, ask them what their 5 steps were. Like make them simplify it down into 5 steps. Because often they'll give you some little gems of wisdom. And so I took that and I just started asking people how to do complicated things in 5 steps. And it was amazing. And so for me, public speaking was like that. Studying it, finding people. I always say like watch a TED Talk twice, watch it once and just learn it. And if they're a good speaker, they'll sort of surprise you and get you to laugh and cry and all of that. But the second time, observe it. Like, how did they do that? How did they set up that moment? How did they transition from what they were saying, have a break, and then go to the slide and then wait for the laugh? Like, how do they mechanically do the thing that made the communication effective? So that was a big thing for me. It was like finding people I admired, studying them, reading about them, and then trying to pull apart the talk, figure out what bits work, what bits don't work. And another thing which was a bit weird, just as a strategy for, I suppose, becoming a better public speaker, if that's the goal, was to listen to the same person talk about the same content matter lots of times. So I would read a book, and then, so I read a book, Adam Grant, 3 of his books. I read 2 of them last week. And then I listened to 20 hours of him on podcasts, his podcast, other people's podcasts, him on panels. And so I'd listen to someone talk about the same content matter from like lots of angles. And that was really helpful, because what I realized were often there were only a couple of key tenets, and 90% of what they said was being customized to the audience. So the case studies, the examples they'd use, the tone was always being tailored. And I sort of had in my mind that maybe a good speaker or a TED Talk was like the schmick polished message. And often it's like a couple of insights, and then they contextualize it. So that contextualization, I think, is a big bit of public speaking. And the trap with that is it's harder to prepare. Like, you've got to, about 2 weeks ago, I'm not stop giving long-winded answers. I got to do a keynote, and it was for like an honors college, like the top 200 students at this university. But because of COVID, they couldn't get them all in one room. So we did 3 lots of 70, 70, and 60. And I had to give the same keynote 3 times in a row, back to back. It was about 45 minutes long. And I had the same 5 steps. I was like, I'm going to give you a 5-step plan. But outside of that, nothing was the same. Every keynote was different because it was a different time of day, or I'd ask for an example from the audience and they'd give me something different. So I was playing off that. So yeah, the contextualizing it to the audience is a big thing. And I'm not quite sure how to teach or practice that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it sounds like if you're giving a public speech, now you've got sort of those five key messages that you're going to base a speech around. But from all that you've said, it sounds like it's been an awful lot of hard work. So practice all of those workshops and podcasts and LinkedIn Lives that you've done, getting up in front of people, makes you feel more comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That there's the study, and that you've also accepted that it's okay to feel nervous before talking. So I think that's a really important message to take forward. I know when we spoke on your podcast a couple of years ago, we spoke about having those butterflies and them being a good thing, because it means that we care about.
Yes, that's right.
What we're doing. So.
Oh, that's funny. That's something that I say quite a lot now. I talk about, like, if people often say, like, how do you get over nerves? And I'll say, like, oh, if you're nervous, it means you care. It's a great point too. You know, you care. If you care, you're nervous. The day I stop being nervous, I'll be very, very worried.
That's definitely my attitude to public speaking as well. So it's been refreshing to hear someone else that's saying, yeah, like, it's something I've worked on and I've certainly gotten better at doing it, but it's not, you don't have to be one of those people that is naturally a public speaker from primary school to be able to get better at communicating your ideas in public. But I guess in today's, like, modern world, you know, talking in public and talking on, like, radio and podcasts and whatnot, you know, there's this whole other dimension of communicating online. And you're a LinkedIn storyteller. You've got over 2 million views on LinkedIn. While spending 2 years traveling the world, you grew a TripAdvisor readership base of more than 130,000 people. Feel like you might know a thing or two about communicating online as well, Josh.
It's very kind. And, you know, that's the downside of putting out numbers like that front and center on your LinkedIn page. People tend to pull on them. Yeah, it's funny. So you made an interesting point about, you've made lots, obviously, always, every time I speak to you, you make lots of interesting points. But just then you made a really interesting point about, like, in the modern world, in the modern age, we need to be able to do these things with podcasts and radios and whatnot. And I think that's increasingly not only becoming true, but it's changing at such a rapid pace. So one of the ideas, and I'm stealing this like I steal all my ideas, I reread one of Yuval Noah Harari's essays the other day, and he's just brilliant, wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus and whatnot. And one of his essays that he wrote in 21 lessons for the 21st century was on education. And his point was, hundreds of years ago, if you grew up in a rural area, if you worked on a farm, your parents worked on a farm, your grandparents worked on a farm, you were pretty confident that if your ma or your old man took you out into the yard and said, today I'm going to teach you how the whole farm thing works, like, you were just pretty confident that that was worth listening to, because like that was your future. So it's like, I'm going to teach you what you need for your future. And even still, I'm sure kids push back on that. Like, they wanted to watch, whatever this Netflix of the 1600s was. But in 1990, in 2000, in 2010, in 2021, it's really difficult to know if the skills we're being taught are going to be relevant. And this move back towards really fundamental skills of communication, interpersonal skills, teamwork, are the top 3 skills in Australia that at least employers are crying out for. It's about, can you speak? Can you communicate? And I think that kind of goes back to a really core part of our human nature, that we don't know if you're going to need to know how to code or analyze data. We don't know what the robots are going to be able to do, but communicate and empathize and feel, and the way you make people feel, I think, is really fundamental. So for me, where it comes to whether it is standing up in front of an audience and teaching or facilitating or speaking, that's obviously verbal communication. But it might be that you don't love that as much, but you're really good on video, or you're really good on radio or audio and podcasting, or you're really good at written communication, or you're really good artistically and you're really good at making drawings and infographics and things like that. I think there are all ways of getting your ideas out to the world. And I just think that bit of finding the medium that suits you and that you enjoy producing and creating is so key. Like, most of those LinkedIn views aren't through verbal LinkedIn videos or audio. They're through written, or they're through PDFs and guides. They're through resources. Lots of authors who sell millions of books. Why I always find them on the podcast is I want to see the difference between the written and the verbal. And I want to say, okay, well, what's their tone when they talk about this? Is it like quite aggressive and punchy? Is it quite like philosophical? Is it very empathetic and caring? And to me, that can bring a book to life. So yeah, even though I suppose whether it's, it's funny you say that, TripAdvisor versus LinkedIn. So for example, when I was traveling, what I realized was, if I started reviewing places, it was a way to like give back and contribute, but also it had helped me reflect and it helped me sort of cement it. And then I would have this map of all these places I'd been and actually what I thought. Because if you say to anyone who's been to Paris, like, what was Paris like? Instantly, if you're hearing me right now, you're thinking of the Eiffel Tower, because that's what everyone does. For most people, the highlight of Paris was not the Eiffel Tower, but it's hard to remember what you did. Whereas when you write about it, to me, it makes it more sort of visceral. Whereas when I'm writing on TripAdvisor, I was writing about my experiences, but the people who read it want to have fun. Their psychology is, I want to go somewhere that most people won't know. I want to learn, I want to do something cool or interesting. Versus on LinkedIn, it's business, it's getting a job, it's something like that. So in the same way that, if someone's going to communicate on a dating app is going to be very different to how they're going to communicate on Instagram, to Facebook, to LinkedIn, to Twitter, to radio. So being able to sort of adjust that, I think, is a part of communication that's not really spoken about. How do you pivot between the pub and interview, work, and LinkedIn?
It's you've been on quite a journey over the last couple of years since you founded Campus Consultancy, Josh. So I'd like to wrap up with one final question, asking, what's your biggest lesson or learning since you started your own business?
The biggest thing is figuring out what's enough. And I don't think we have much of a conversation as a culture about the idea of enough. So what's enough work time, enough achievement, enough quote unquote impact, enough financial returns, enough. That's something that I'm really interested in. If yes, have big goals and at the same time be grateful for the moment. And I think I like those two extremes. And often that paradox is enough to throw people's brains. And it definitely was for mine. And I needed to be more grateful with what I had and dream bigger. Like I needed to be pulled in both of those directions. But I think of those two as like, that's the everyday pull on a journey towards somewhere. And for me, the most interesting question is, where are you journeying to? What's enough? Where are you content? What's the life you really want? And having a really clear picture of that. And I know no shortage of entrepreneurs with goals. I know almost no entrepreneur who's content with what they have. And so that's been a really big learning to me of, oh, lots of people are striving for something they don't want. And I think that can leave I've seen that leave a lot of unhappiness. And my biggest learning, which I'm still learning, is how do you be really happy? We're filming this on Tuesday. How do you have a great Tuesday? Like, can Tuesday be enough? When's it enough? And not like 5 p.m. like I've had enough, but like when are you like, what would have to happen for today to be enough? And then can you let your mind be at peace? So that's something that, yeah, I'm working on, and I think would be really interesting to have other people think about and work on as well.
Yeah, wow, that's certainly, I think that's one that's going to be mulling around in my brain for the next few weeks or months as well, Josh. I think I knew that today would be a special interview with you, and I feel like definitely exceeded all of my expectations and set a very high bar for the rest of our guests on season 3 of Leadership is Language, Conversation with Thought Leaders. So thank you very much for your time today and sharing all these wonderful, thought-provoking wisdom and insights with us.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure chatting.